before we go any further in youth ministry, I want to talk about a theology of youth ministry. That we're not just out there contextualizing ministry because it's what culture does. Culture has a youth culture. It has a adolescent culture, a young professional culture. But we want to create ministry that is theologically grounded. Hey everybody, welcome to Foundations of Youth Ministry. My name is Gabriel Zamora. Just to give you an introduction to myself and what we'll kind of be covering in the course, I just wanted to say hello. And I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you for investing in yourself. And we're going to have an incredible time. In this class, you're going to learn core competencies on what it's going to take to be effective in youth ministry. You're going to learn some best kept practices on how to be healthy, how to develop yourself as a leader so that you will always be able to be effective ongoing. But a little bit about myself. I'm married. I've been married for 10 years. I got three little kids. I got a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and an 8-month-old. I've been in youth ministry for 12 years in a myriad of different contexts. I have done youth ministry as a volunteer. Bivocationally, vocationally. I've done youth ministry in a small church, minority dominant church. I've done youth ministry as a volunteer youth worker, bivocationally, then in a medium-sized church, larger medium-sized church, and then a mega church where we had a staff, budgets, and all of the above. And also in different regions. I've done youth ministry in the Southwest, the Midwest, the Northeast, and in South Florida, the Southeast. And here's what I can tell you. We've, by God's grace, been able to be effective in each of those stops. So here's what I want you to know in this class. You're going to get a foundational overview for youth ministry. And I believe these principles are axiomatic in that they're true from anywhere you find them. So you can contextualize each of these foundations and principles to where you are. Whether you're a volunteer, you're bivocational, vocational, or whatever size of church, these will make sense in all of them. What we don't want to do is build youth ministries that are only successful if they're a unicorn, if you're an incredible worship movement, if you just so happen to be more creative than everybody else, but that these principles would be tried and true and modeled after the pattern of Jesus. So I can't wait to get started. Again, welcome to Foundations of Youth Ministry. Hey everybody, welcome back to Foundations of Youth Ministry. This is class 1. We're going to be talking about a theology of youth ministry. And anything that we do in ministry, you want to endeavor to be integrous to the biblical text. And so our hope here is not to apply best practices of entrepreneurship or corporate organizational leadership pragmatics, but we want to be grounded theologically in the Bible. So it's okay to borrow best practices from the corporate world or best practices from entrepreneurial principles. However, those need to complement and be confirmed and affirmed by a robust, credible theology. So before we go any further in youth ministry, I want to talk about a theology of youth ministry. That we're not just out there contextualizing ministry because it's what culture does. Culture has a youth culture. It has a adolescent culture, a young professional culture. But we want to create ministry that is theologically grounded. So in youth ministry, you can see this even pretty quickly if you just look at statistics in the church world. The majority of all of us come to salvation and knowledge in Jesus Christ before the age of 18. In fact, the majority of us will really come to know Jesus between 4 and 14. So if we're looking at a moment where we want our best ROI standing for a return on investment, it would be to your advantage and my advantage that we would really concentrate on young people. But again, this is grounded by a biblical theology. In Deuteronomy 6 and 11, you see that God commands the children of Israel to teach these commands to their children, to write them down in their rising up and they're sitting in their home, when they walk along the road, when they lie down and when they get up. Write these commands down. Teach these to your children. So there's this emphasis on relaying the precepts and the biblical principles and the faithfulness of God to a younger generation. In Psalm 78, 5 through 7, he says this to Jacob: He gave his instructions to Israel. He commanded our ancestors, teach them to your children, so the next generation might know them, and the children not yet born. And they in turn will teach their own children, so each generation should set its hope anew on God, not forgetting his glorious miracles and obeying his commands. Psalms 102:18 says it this way: let this be recorded for future generations. In other words, again, the next generation, so that a people not yet born will praise the Lord. Psalms 145, he reiterates the principle one more time. Let each generation tell its children of your mighty acts. Let them proclaim your power. I will meditate on your majestic, glorious splendor and your wonderful miracles. Your awe-inspiring deeds will be on every tongue. I will proclaim your greatness. Everyone will share the story of your wonderful goodness. They will sing with joy about your righteousness. So the text in Psalms 145 and verse 4 starts off with, let each generation tell its children. Let each generation be effective. Let each generation be faithful to passing on the faith in God. Let each generation do this. And then the effect, the conclusion of that thought culminates in verse 7. It says, and everyone will share of this wonderful goodness. So the concept of youth ministry or theology is an intergenerational one. It's not just pass on to the youth, then it's their turn. It's a passing on to them so that all of us simultaneously will declare the wonderful works of God. In Titus chapter 2, verses 1 through 9, you see that the text begins to give a prescription to the church on how ministry should be done. Older women teach younger women. Older men teach younger men. So you see in the text that there's this intergenerational emphasis towards ministry, that it wasn't supposed to be, oh, we just do youth ministry, and youth ministry sits on a Wednesday night or a midweek service, and adults meet on Sunday morning in this area of the campus or whatever have you, but it was always supposed to be an intergenerational one. So when you think of a theology of youth ministry, it's the command and the commission of the church, of all peoples, doing our job from the pastor to the parent in passing on our faith to our younger generation. You know, every organization has to answer the question, how are they going to pass on what they're doing to another generation? How are they going to contextualize for another generation, that they wouldn't be bogged down in methodologies or models of ministry, but that they would be, with a core conviction, faithful to the message of Jesus Christ. And that is your task and my task as youth ministers to do it now. But it is a holistic one. The whole church is supposed to play their part. Now, the church has the most important mission statement in the world. It's not just like Google's or Microsoft or Apple, and they do a pretty good job of continuously contextualizing for another generation. But the church of the living God with the most important mission statement in the world, to pass on this faith to our children's children, has been given to the church. We have to know that that's a command given in Scripture by God that we should never, ever forget. But we're in an interesting time in the world right now. In fact, we're in a breakdown of the family unit. When you look at a theology of youth ministry, the ideal place for faith to be passed on was actually through parents. If you look at Deuteronomy 6 and 11, Moses is writing to families to pass on the faith. Now, we know if we're recording this in America, and you may watch this in a different context or in a different country, but the reality is there's a breakdown in the family unit. The family unit is not what it used to be, and so even Christian families, some are dealing with divorce, some are dealing with fractures and systemic brokenness in those families, and so the family is not always able to pass on the faith in a way that they were. And so the family is not able to pass on the faith in a way that was probably ideal and in a way that God always wanted. However, And that's where God raises up youth workers and youth pastors as an appropriation of grace to come alongside parents who are already trying to make disciples out of their kids, and to come alongside those families where maybe there's a parent missing or the parents aren't believers in Jesus Christ, but that young person has found faith in him. So the youth worker comes alongside of them and begins to be an appropriation of grace, a helpmate in that moment to come and be faithful to the commission of God to pass on our faith to a younger generation. But if you look at a quick little brief overview of the current state of the church in America specifically even, we're losing 1 million young people when they graduate high school every year. 1 million young people are leaving the church every year. Now, what we can't say is that this is the result of youth ministries doing it wrong. This is just the result of youth pastors being terrible, only having events, serving too much pizza, and not knowing how to preach the glorious gospel. It's not that simplistic. You have to look at this deeper than that and holistically and say, how are we as a church not just equipping youth pastors to do youth ministry, but equipping parents to disciple their kids? And pastors, how are we discipling parents to then be disciplers of their children? So it's a holistic approach. If we're going to right this wrong and change the trajectory of the American church and the church in the world, we're going to have a holistic approach, and it's going to have to be a core conviction between all of us, from adult ministry to children's ministry, to know this, that there is a theology of youth ministry that says this is all of our problem and we all can be the answer. That we all are passing on our faith to our young people. So when you look at youth ministry, it's got to be so much more holistic than that. In fact, Gen Z, that is the current generation that's 19 years old and younger. They're the first post-Christian generation in American history. So even if you've been in ministry for 50 years, you've never seen this before. Even if we've been doing youth ministry like myself for over a decade, we've never seen this before. This is the first post-Christian generation of all time. And so somewhere we've missed the importance of passing on our faith to a younger demographic. So I wanted to start off with the theology of ministry, because what I really want to talk about is this can't just be a perfunctory moment or check off the list in your church. So, oh, great, we have a youth worker now. We can forget about the youth. They meet in midweek. We finally raised up enough of a budget to have a youth ministry, and they have their own program, their own systems going on over here, but it has to be an approach that the whole of the church is getting in on and wanting to be a part of. But here's the good news. I do believe that the crisis is always the opportunity. So right now we're in a crisis of faith in the Western world, in the Western church. We're in a crisis of faith, and so youth ministry feels that first. Many times what's happening in youth ministry, you feel and you have to think about where the church is going to be in 15 years. So if you look at most churches right now,